Hello, viewers. Welcome to the Write-Tukubuli Virtual Literary Festival. And today we have another author showcase, and we have the lovely Joanne Skerrett with us today. So, hi, Joanne.
Hello, it's so great to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Very excited about this.
Great, thank you. Well, let's jump straight in. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your writing journey? Did you always know you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, I did. It's kind of interesting. I remember being a student at Dominica Grammar School in the early '80s, and I think my teachers might have seen something in me. I remember Mr. Lockhart, who was the principal at the time. He brought me to a meeting of the Writers Guild with him, and I think I don't know, I might have frozen up anyway, but and I had a short story published in our grammar school newspaper that one of my friends, Gloria Walsh, actually, she showed it to me like a few years ago. I was like, oh my gosh, I might have been 11 or 12 at the time when I wrote it. So I think I always knew I wanted to do it. I didn't know that I would actually achieve it, but yes, I always knew I wanted to be a writer.
Awesome. And how did you actually learn to be a writer? How did you learn about the craft of writing? How did you go about that?
So I think, for writing, I think reading, being a bookworm always helps. That's, I think, a big part of the journeys, that reading a lot of books teaches you to assimilate and, absorb writing, the structure of telling a story and that sort of thing. But I think the training for me began when, in my first career, I worked for various newspapers out of college. Well, during college, I had an internship at the Boston Globe, and that kind of opened up my career as an editor. And I worked for newspapers in North Carolina and Chicago. And then I was at the Boston Globe for a number of years. So I think that's where I really learned how to, kind of write, from reading and editing really, really great writers. So that was the beginning of my training. Later on, I went on and got a master's in writing, but I think it was working in journalism, having to deliver headlines and copy on a nightly deadline basis. That's what's really helped me develop my skills.
Okay, wow, cool. And I'm very familiar with your books, but for those who don't know about you and your books, can you tell us about some of the books you've published?
Yeah, so I started out in like 2005. That was when my first book was published, and that was during the quote unquote chick lit era. There was just like a lot of young women's fiction being published at the time, and I just sort of like rode that train, wanting to just get my foot in the in the publishing world any way that I could. I think in at least one of those books, in each of those books, I do mention Dominica, but I didn't get to write my first book that was set on Dominica until Paulie Petullo published Abraham's Treasure, and that was in 2011, I think, and that was just such a joy to write that. It's about two teenage brothers going on adventures across the island and searching for treasure. So that was really fun. That was my first book that was set all on Dominica. And then my latest book that came out in 2023, and that's Island Man. And that is kind of like a bigger span in terms of setting. A lot of it takes place on Dominica, some of it takes place in Boston. It's really the story of a family with roots in Dominica and their immigration journey. With 2017 Hurricane Maria being sort of like the anchoring backdrop for all of it. So that one is I think probably the hardest thing I've ever written. So very proud of it.
Yeah, for both those books, Dominica really stands out. So, you were brought up in Dominica, right?
Mm-hmm.
What age did you leave?
I was 15 or 16. Yeah, I was a teenager already. Yeah.
Okay. So for those two books, how does Dominica kind of inspire and influence your writing? Because as I say, Dominica is so it's so prevalent in those books.
Well, I like to say that Dominica is the perfect literary character. I mean, Dominica itself, the island is beautiful, it's mysterious. It has, a very interesting history and past, whether it's political or just the mystical past. I think everyone who has lived or lives on the island, you probably hear stories. But I think that the island itself, as a character, it does things, whether it's the unpredictable weather or just the beauty of it that is like untamable. It's sort of like a femme fatale, I guess. I guess. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's the perfect setting and the perfect character for a writer to play around with.
Yeah, I see that quite a bit, I think, with writers from the region. So yeah, and let's touch on Island Man, because I thought that was such an excellent book, and you cover an area that I don't often see written about. So it's set. Some of it is set during the political, like, turbulent times of the 1970s and 1980s, and also you have some of it set after the turbulent post-Hurricane Maria period. So what made you want to choose both those kind of flashpoint times for settings of this book?
Well, it's just me. I think I was, my uncle had recently passed away, and that was his era, 60s, 70s, and I was a child during a lot of the political stuff that was going on in the late 70s, early 80s. I had no idea what was going on. I remember one time walking back from the Roseville Public Library, and there were all these people in town, and I guess there was shooting and whatever. It was during one of the Patrick John things, and I just kind of I ran home, and I had no context. I was too young to really understand what was going on. So I knew that these things had happened. And so I had gone back and done some research, really reading Dr. Honeychurch's books and, any other history I could find. And I just found it fascinating that, that all this history was happening while, I was growing up, while my family was there, my parents' era and all of that. And I couldn't find anywhere where that had been written about by other authors, not about Dominica anyway. Other islands have their own, their own. But yeah, and I'm not a historian. I think and I had to improvise a lot around it, so I can't really just say, oh, this book is like all fact. I was writing about a family, and how they were navigating the times that they were existing in. So I used, the what I had learned from reading the history, from talking to my father, and other older people in my life who were still living on the island. And I did the same thing for the post-hurricane, because I wasn't there for Maria, but a lot of my family members experienced it. So it's really their experiences of it that you read in the book, how they felt the aftermath of it, and yeah. So that's what I used. It's just what I could glean from other people and other sources.
Okay. I thought you did a really good job of that. And again, it's not something that we read a lot about. So kudos to you for tackling that. I mean, did you have any concerns about tackling that subject matter, about how you would portray people and politics? And did you feel any kind of sense of responsibility for doing that?
Yeah, and I still have concerns, but I think I know that especially with the stuff concerning the Dread Act, and I know that it was a painful time for many families during the time that happened, and I feel I know that it's a sensitive topic, but again, I felt that I hope that people understand it's a work of fiction. And again, I was writing about a particular family, fictionalized family, and how they were experiencing it. So, It's not a book that is fact. And, I hope people can appreciate that this is just, a rendering of how any Dominican was experiencing life during turbulent times. And it's not meant to, it's not meant to tell, it's not meant to deliver a certain narrative in favor of or against anything. It's just, this is what was happening, and this is how a particular character or family experienced it. So.
Yeah, and hopefully, it will inspire others to consider like writing about that period, either in fiction or non-fiction, creative non-fiction work. So you mentioned about using Lennox's books a lot for your research and speaking to family, etc. Did you do, was there any other type of research you did for The Island Man?
No, there is a great, it came out, oh my gosh, a few years ago. It's why can't I remember? But it's an anthology of Caribbean literature and history. I'm trying to remember, but it's like a 3-book series. And I remember just devouring all of it came out of professors from UWI, I believe. And I read that, and I got a lot of context just for writing about, the Caribbean and, the small islands, and some of the, the writing that had already been done, and how, even just how to write characters and how to, deliver language and dialect and that sort of thing. I think that reading those 3 anthologies helped me a lot. But I would say a lot of it is just me flying blind. Again, I'm not a scholar. I wish I was. I'm not a scholar of any of this. A lot of it is lived experience. And again, it's just talking with people. And so.
Yeah, cool. So have you had much feedback from people in Dominica, particularly, or Dominicans? Have you had much feedback? Have they said they've read the book? Is it available in Dominica as well?
There were a few copies at Jay's. I'm not sure if they still have any more, but there were a few copies there. I have had feedback from a few Dominicans, and they have loved it. They have, I think, some of the things that brought back painful memories for some of us. And again, for me too, like writing it, there was a lot of times of just like, this is sad. But yeah, I know it's not well known or well talked about on the island. I would like to change that. But, I'm patient, however long it takes that people will find it and, interact with it. Even if it's in a negative way or, in a critical way, I'm open to that. So yeah, but I have had some good feedback, and I appreciate all the feedback that I've gotten so far, and I hope to get more.
That's great. I always say, it's so important to go back. I like the term Sankofa, which is, go back and find what has been left behind, in the sense that everything that's going on today is because of the past. So sometimes it is painful and it may take some time, but I do think it's important that we look at those times in history, because it's why, everything has an impact on the present and the future. So thank you for tackling that. So I just want to ask, like, generally, what has been some of the highlights or not so great times of your writing journey? How long has your writing journey spanned, your professional writing journey? So just some of the highs and lows.
Yeah, so I'd say, it's, off and on over 20 years. And I started before, social media was so prevalent. So, you would have, even if you weren't like a, top of the line author, I think publishers would kind of think, okay, well, we have to just do this amount of marketing. You would, go to the bookstores and try to go to book fairs and do these events. And that would actually help sales. Now, I think with social media, it's just a different game right now. You have to be social media savvy and very present if you build that following. And I've actually heard like it doesn't really translate to sales. It might translate to popularity, which is good. You get your name out there, but I don't know how much that translates to sales. So that's some of the biggest changes that I've seen. And you asked about highs and lows, and I think that's kind of a low for me. I mean, I think for most writers, we're probably like introverted.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy being on social media without, doom scrolling politics or whatever. And I don't enjoy that. But I don't like the marketing process at all. I have never liked it. And I'm very happy.
I'm feeling you there for sure.
Yeah, I'm very happy to just sit at home and write. And, I'm okay with that. But the actual marketing of the work, that to me is that's always just been a chore. I try to say I should be more grateful. I really ought to be. It's really a privilege to be able to share your work with other people and have them read it. And I enjoy when I do get out there, I enjoy meeting with people and talking with them about the work. I think it's just the nervousness of going out into an unknown situation. It's nerve-wracking. But yeah, I don't like social media.
Yeah. What about some of the highs? Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the high points. What are some of the high
points? Yeah, the high points are, well, actually writing and finishing something is no great feeling in the world. It's just like, oh my gosh, I am done. I wrote this thing and I feel good about it. It's done. And then, and meeting people that, enjoyed the work, and they want to talk about, this character, or I hated this person, or I could identify with this person, or I really connected with this place. I like, I think those are some of the highs of the writing experience, is just meeting readers, because I'm a reader myself, and just talking about, the experience of a book,
Yeah, and I think that's so true, because I think people forget it's quite, you're alone quite a lot of the time when you're writing. So when you hear from a reader, it's always such a joy. So I really try to feed back to writers, because I know it's so nice when I myself hear from readers. So yeah, cool. So yes, and you talked about, I know Abraham's Treasures was published by Papillon Press. Your other, Island Man, was Red End Press, I think. And what about your first book? So how did you go about getting publishers for your 3 books?
So my first 3 were published by Kensington Publishing, and that's a house in New York. And I went the traditional way. I remember just writing dozens and dozens of query letters. I would finish a book, then, you would write the query, just asking to various agents, literary agents, asking them to represent you. You tell them about yourself in the letter. You give a summary of your book and who you think your book will appeal to. And, back then, you actually did it on paper. So you would have the first 30 or 50 pages printed out and an actual letter.
Wow.
Go to the post office and mail it out and wait and wait and wait. And you would get a rejection, for me anyway, you would get rejection letter after rejection letter in the mail. Eventually I got an agent, and it was, he was a well-known enough New York agent. And, I look back on it now, I'm like, wow, that was really, it was really a blessing, because, it was just a really hard thing to do, but I did send out tons of letters.
Yeah.
And eventually got an agent, and he decided to represent me. And so the great thing about having an agent, you don't have to deal with the publishing houses yourself. They have the contacts with the publishers, so they do the work of trying to sell your book to a publisher, and so that's how those 3 books got published. I think it was a 2-book. Yeah, I think it was a 2 or 3 book deal. So I already had two that were done. So yeah, he was able to sell those, and yeah, so that was the process. But there was a lot of rejection, and I was just comforted myself. I'm like, well, I have a job, so I'm not waiting on this to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's very key, because it's, again, I think trying to be a successful writer is trying to be like Michael Jordan. Is just only a few people get to be that NBA level of making enough to live on. So you have to be humble and realistic. So yeah.
Yeah, and it really needs stamina and perseverance, right? Never giving up, really. Yeah, those rejection letters, they're not easy at all. So yeah.
No.
Yeah. So just generally, how have you found the whole publishing experience, the editing process, that kind of thing? How has that been for you?
Yeah, for me, I mean, so I think I credit, my years at the newspapers for, at least training me to write clean. So I've never had like an experience where I had to have a major edit. So that's been good. I think once the publishers have had the book, they will come back. With the manuscript, they will come back with questions that I can usually answer, or they'll want to make certain changes. I think the biggest the biggest edit I've ever had is one editor who said, but this is for one of my earlier books, that I needed to have more explicit, romantic scenes, because I'm very comfortable writing those. And it's just like, I was just like, oh my gosh. So it was like, no, you need to just tell a little more of what's going on here. I was like, I got a good Christian girl. Yeah. So I think, those are the kinds of things I've had to, navigate, but no major edits. I've never had a situation. I know it happens where editors, you want to. So I did have one situation, I think, with Island Man. My new agent, well, she's not that new. I've been with her many years, right by now. And we were having trouble selling Island Man at first. People loved it, but this was 2021. And there were a lot of things going on at the time, COVID. And in America, there was sort of this, I think it was shortly after the George Floyd, thing. And, I think at least one editor said, can she make the main character a woman? Because in that case, they would have been more willing to take it. And I said no.
Wow, that's major, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, well, I'd have to rewrite the whole thing. Yeah. And it was so hard for me to write a man in the first place. And I was just like,
I know, you'd put all that work into, and that was another thing I was going to say, you put yourself into that character, to write that character. Yeah.
It was very challenging. And so I just wasn't, so I said, no, I'm not going to do that. So I gave up that opportunity, and it was a good publishing house, but at that point, I just said, I'm not going to do that. So,
yeah, but you got a good publishing house in the end. So that's cool. So, yeah. And I wanted to ask about you published for the YA audience, right? And an adult audience. So do you have a favorite genre, and including that the romantic genre as well? Do you like any one over the other?
I prefer, the YA, I wrote, I think, 2 short stories that are YA, and then Abraham's Treasure. I had a lot of fun writing those, but I still feel like, I think it's challenging to me because with every year I get more out of touch with what's going on up there. And I would love to write another YA, but I'm very intimidated by the fact that, teenagers now, it's almost like they speak a different language.
Yeah.
And, so the learning process of writing that authentically, that would be interesting and probably very challenging. So I think that's the biggest thing for me. I enjoy writing it to the extent that I, think back on, the fun of being a kid or a teenager or it is, but wanting to strike the right tone. I think that's very challenging because, again, it's very hard for me to identify with teenagers now, and I don't have many teenagers in my life to give me,
first-hand experience. Yeah. Yeah, I'd be interested to know, if you've had much feedback from men about the male character and whether they felt you'd got that right. The emotions and stuff. Obviously, there's no one stereotypical man, of course. So.
Right. Yeah, right. I mean, the one guy that I know who read it very closely, I mean, he did not mention that. He was overwhelmed by the story. He really liked it. He grew up in Dominica.
Yeah, great. So, great.
I think that he was not really focused on that. But yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned you've got full-time job. How do you balance the writing? Do you have a strict writing schedule that you give yourself? How do you work it out?
So, with my work, I'm an attorney, and so for many years I worked for law firms, and honestly, there was no writing going on during those years, not writing for fun, because I was very, very busy working extremely long hours. So I would say it was 5+ years. I really wasn't doing much of that at all. And so that was between Abraham's Treasure and Island Man. I was very, very busy. So I wasn't doing a lot of writing at that point. And then I changed jobs. And so I'm still an attorney, but the work that I'm doing now, I have a little bit more time. So I have more space in my head to be creative. And so I wouldn't say I have a schedule. I'm one of those undisciplined writers, and I write about I forget the name. Was it John? I don't want to say John Irving. I don't know, one of those really, really well-known writers. I forget who it was. It's like they get up in the morning and they write for 8 hours a day or something. That is not me. No. It's like it's when the spirit moves. That sounds familiar. So I just, I'm not a disciplined writer. I hate to admit it, but I mean, if I'm at a point where I have to edit something, the manuscript, and deliver it by a certain date, I will get into it and do it. Yeah. But if I'm just writing at the beginning stages, it's just because for me, a lot of it comes from feeling a certain way. I'm sure you can identify with that. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And if it doesn't feel right, then nothing good is going to get on that page. So, yeah. Yeah. I think it's important, though, to share that with writers, because sometimes I find it quite intimidating when I read all these rules of you have to have these set things that you do as a writer. And I always think, well, that's not me. Maybe I'm not a proper writer so I think it's important when writers share those things. But, yeah. So, one of the things I've been asking writers who live in Dominica is what are some of the advantages and disadvantages being a writer living here. So you don't live in Dominica. So what are some of the advantages and disadvantages, especially when you're writing about Dominica, living outside Dominica, do you think? Well, I don't have a community. So, I'm sure there are plenty of people in Dominica who've never heard of me, and that can be kind of frustrating because I write about Dominica, but and I think it's just the feeling that whether it's true or not, this question of legitimacy. Even when I go home now, because I've pretty much lost my accent, and that's a whole other story. But it's just people, and again, whether I'm right or wrong, I think, are you really, did you really grow up here? Are you, what do you know about Dominica? And I have to okay, all right, I did grow up here. I did go to grammar school, go back and check the records, all of that. There's my house in Bath Estate, all of that, our house and my family's house. But so I think it's just dealing with that. The question of are you legitimately a Dominican writer if you don't live there, then not feeling connected to the community, And number three, which I think is really important, is having a real pulse on life in Dominica today. I mean, I visit
Yeah.
two or more times a year, so I feel that that's only been in the last few years. So I'm kind of like conscious of the fact that I may not be getting all the nuance of real life on the islands, right? Because I'm still just kind of dipping in and dipping out, so that's always a concern for me. Like, oh, am I writing it like a tourist or someone, who's just so far removed? So that person who actually lives there, when they read that, they're like, that would never happen. Right. So yeah.
Yeah. And it's so deeply layered, isn't it? Community, it's so entangled and deeply layered. Yeah. So, yeah. And what about the advantages of living where you live in terms of the publishing industry and getting your book published and things? What are some of the advantages that you recognize might not exist in Dominica?
Well, yeah, I mean, being in, America, and I'm guessing if you're in the UK as well, then you have, this direct exposure to the publishing industry there. And, if you have a good product, you'll find somebody to publish it. And you will get, the marketing of these big companies behind you. They will print and, print your book and, distribute them to bookstores all over the world. I know, like, my first couple of books, they were like all over the world, translated into different languages. So I think, being in a big wealthy country, you have those advantages. And being, I think if you're writing Dominica and trying to break through, it's going to be very much harder, I think, because I think the first question, it's a business, publishers want to know is like, who's going to buy this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I think for them, is they're like, okay, well, you're from this island, a small island, and you're not here. You can't go about and go to Barnes and Noble and sit there on an afternoon or whatever. So I think it's just being closer to where the action is. That's one of the bigger advantages. And the other one is kind of like, well, I guess it's the flip side of what I said was a disadvantage, is that for me anyway, Dominica exists in a very, I have all this nostalgia and idealization of life. Again, I know there were ups and downs and, negatives and all that. And I do address that in my writing, but it's still sort of just like, when I think of Dominica, it's just an Isle of beauty, Isle of splendor, right? And, sometimes I hear people who live there, they criticize, and say, oh my gosh, things are so terrible. I'm like, could it be? So,
Yeah. living realities. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just like, it's stuck in your brain at a certain point in your life. And it's just like, that may not necessarily be reality. But you get to make it a Dominica you want to be, because you don't have to live there and experience it every day.
Yeah. And I often wonder, is anonymity a thing as well? Like, when you live in a place with so many people like America, you can write something and be pretty anonymous. But I always think if you write something in Dominica, related to Dominica is quite a small community. So I always find that, that might be anonymity can be both a plus and a minus. So I just wondered if you felt that living in America.
I agree. I definitely agree with that. I think even, what we talked about earlier with Island Mountain and feeling brave enough to go there, talking about, some of the things around the Dread Act. I'm like, well, I don't, even if, someone is, I don't know, sore about this, they hopefully can't possibly think I had any evil intention. I haven't, lived there in a while. I haven't interacted with anyone there. I'm not trying to, make anybody, I'm not trying to do an expose on anyone. I think for someone who lives there and has relationships there, it's different, because then you have to see people in the market and you're like, well, you portrayed my family this way or whatever. And, you did it with an agenda in mind. So you're absolutely right. And yeah, the anonymity and I guess just being removed from,
Mm-hmm.
from some of that, some of those possible emotions that could come up, I guess it helps. Um, and again, I hope people can see that, I try to be objective and about that is there's no agenda there. So,
Yeah. Cool. I've just got a couple more questions. I really, really enjoying talking to you, and just a couple more questions, if that's okay. So, the one that we all want to know is: have you got anything new in the pipeline that you don't mind talking about, or is it too early in the stage for you to
yeah,
mention?
I'm always working on something. When I finish it, that's the other story. But I'm always working on. Um, my aunt my aunt told me one of the craziest stories that I've ever heard, and I thought it was fascinating. We were talking about something else, but she said, "Oh yeah, you can, what some people have said in the old days, you can light a candle and put it under somebody's bed, and then it's some form of doing evil to the person, and eventually the person will die or the person will get sick." I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that is ridiculous. How would they not know about the candle? Wouldn't the house burn down eventually? But it's just, and again, it's just
Some
this,
research required there. Yeah.
right? But it's this whole, and again, I was just, oh yeah, magical realism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that, instantly resonated for me. And again, my family members just know, don't talk to Joanne. Do not ever. Don't say anything to her. Just say, how are you? And keep walking.
Yeah. Yeah, I think writers, people are always a bit wary. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, we'll look forward to that then, whatever that turns out to be in the end. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, that's the thing about Dominica, just so rich in stories and
Yeah.
possibilities. It makes it very easy to write about. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And one of we're hosting quite a few Lit Vibes discussion, and one of the things we're going to be discussing is AI technologies and the use of AI technologies for writers. About the future of that, but also how do writers feel if perhaps some of their books have been used against their permission to train AI models. So do you have any strong views about that at all?
I wouldn't say my views are strong, but I definitely am wary. Just to see the way AI is showing up in so many parts of our lives, that I think it's definitely a concern. Am not an early adopter, so I haven't even messed around with ChatGPT or anything like that. But I was joking with my agent a couple of weeks ago, because for the latest novel that I'm working on, I said, you know what, one of the worst things I hate, because you have to do like a 2-page summary of the entire novel. And that's one of the parts of writing. I should have said that earlier. I really hate just
Yeah.
summarizing the whole thing in 2 pages. And I said, I'm gonna use AI to do it. And she's like, don't do that, because it's going to take all of the information and and she's like, it's gonna be out there and searchable and all. I was like, oh, I didn't know that's how it worked. So I think writers have to be have to educate themselves on what AI does, what it can do, and how it can. It can probably be helpful, I'm sure, but in a lot of ways, it can steal your intellectual property and all your hard work. It's just going to be, out there, and you have no recourse, or I don't know if you have any recourse. But I think, yeah, it's better to be informed and wary than just to be, I think, fully embracing of a technology like that is so dependent on, existing
Content. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Thank you for that. And the other discussion we're going to be having, one of the other discussions is about, this thing about how do we get our work seen? I mean, you, for getting your work seen in Dominica and other islands as well, how can we improve the distribution of Dominican books to locally, regionally, and wider field? Do you have any ideas or thoughts about that at all?
I mean, again, so I follow a few authors, and, the ones that are known are the ones that are out there, and I don't know if it's them posting or if they've hired someone to post for them, but it's just being ubiquitous, I guess, being where the readers are and going to things. I think, there's going to be some outlays going to, I guess, Calabash and these writing festivals across the region where you can meet other people who can, introduce you to other people. I think forming writing communities. I had a really great, when I lived in DC, I had a really great writing community of, Black women writers, and some of them were very well known. And, just knowing those people, they can pour into you, and, they go look at your stuff and help you. So I think it's number one is community, and working together with other people. Like, even like what we're doing now, Celia. I mean, I was so grateful when, you reached out, because I'm like, well, yeah, I love talking about Dominica. I love talking to fellow Dominicans. I can do that. So I think even things like this, that gets the word out, because you never know who's going to come across it online,
Yeah. And I think it's just so important. It's a way of networking as well, that, as we were saying, a lot of us don't really know each other as well, linking the diaspora with the local community as well. This method is just the best method to do that, so that we can all get to know about each other. So yeah. I was also thinking about, there's quite a few Dominica associations everywhere that Dominicans congregate. I mean, that's one of the things I really enjoyed about your book, was seeing these communities that form where people help each other and support each other when they come over from Dominica to America. So I wondered if there's a way to work more with those Dominican overseas organizations or associations. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I found helpful, again, in Boston, where I live now, there are a ton of Caribbean people. Well, it's a very international city. So I go to, like Jamaicans will have certain events. They will have the Caribbean Carnival, like that was last weekend, and there's one in Cambridge as well. And I've gone to do promo there. I'll just go, I'll have a booth, I'll have my books there. And I connect with people who are like making shea butter products, artists who paint, but these are all Caribbean people. And that's how you just connect with all kinds of artists, singers and poets. And I think that's really helpful, is just like not, looking for just the writing community, just look for people in the diaspora who are artists as well, because we're all looking for the same thing. So, and, in New York, which is not too far from me, there's a ton of stuff going on with, writers, Caribbean writers. I'm sure you've seen that, and the Brooklyn Literary Festival. So just being a part of those things. I'm not always great at it. I get lazy sometimes, but yeah, showing your face and following people and reaching out to them and being where they are. And I think that can be achieved in down there too, is just connect with people. And even if they're not a writer, but there are a lot of artists in Dominica. So an art showcase that features all artists, that's building a lot of awareness.
I always feel that you just need to make sure that's done on an authentic basis. Sometimes you can feel like, again, with the whole marketing world or whatever, this pressure or network and connect and stuff. But I always feel if it's not authentic, if it's not a real authentic connection, I always think that, that's a bit maybe not so effective. And I just think it's so important that everything's done from a place of heart and real connection, as opposed to just marketing that you can just feel you're being pushed into those things.
I so agree. And I think that's the issue for some of us who are like, we don't want to do the marketing because we know this is not really real. I'm just, trying to sell a book or whatever. But when you come across people that are just passionate about the same things
Yeah.
that you are,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's so easy. Like the conversation that
Yeah.
we're having now, you
Yeah.
know. And one other thing I forgot to mention was universities, because they're always we have conferences or whatever, and and if a person is connected to a university, just getting that, oh yeah, you're having a conference, I'll come and do a reading, or do a panel. So there's
Okay.
and you get exposure to a whole bunch of students and professors that could use your book in teaching. So that's another.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just the final question I have, I'm so grateful to you and your time. So just wondered if you had any advice for people starting on their writing journey. Is there any advice that you want to leave the viewers with at all?
I would say, pursue, more than proficiency. Um, there are a lot of good writers out there. And if you respect the craft, I think, and you have determination, I think you'll be successful. Maybe not John Grisham or whatever successful, but you will, but yeah, do what you have to do to get better every day at your craft, whether it's reading better books or, just practicing writing, just become good at what you do. And at least at the end of the day, you can say, I, I'm a decent writer, and, feel confident about that. So, yeah. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Joanne. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I really wish you all the best with your forthcoming books. And I'm looking to see what transpires with the spark of the story about the candle under the bed. So, and to viewers, thank you so much for listening. Please tune in to the rest of the what we've showcasing during the festival, the virtual festival. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Write-Tukubuli, and check out what you may have missed so far. And please, the most important thing is, if you see something you like, you've enjoyed, please share it. Share it with your friends, your families, share it on your social media, and just help us encourage our up and coming writers and not so up and coming writers. And please use the hashtags #Write-Tukubuli and #Write-Tukubuli 2025. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Really enjoyed it.
Great.
Hi, my name is Joanne Skerrett. I'm going to be reading for you a small portion of my book, Island Man, which is based in Dominica and the United States. In this section, the main character and his uncle are driving across the island shortly after Hurricane Maria in 2017. So they're just seeing some of the devastation that's happened. So a small section. For all of Cousin Eddie's pessimism, things were actually moving along. The first international aid ships had come in, and people were queued up for water, canned goods, and toiletries. International news reporters were filming from atop piles of twisted rubble and interviewing teary-eyed Dominicans for the entire world to see. We need help. Dominicans need help. Please help us. Don't close your eyes to this suffering. Please help. Ay, 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 people suffering. Cousin Eddie shook his head as we dropped off a couple of people to join a throng of grim-faced locals walking purposely, most likely to check on their loved ones. Devastation quieted us the further we drove out from Canefield. It shocked our bus riders into a numb silence. Piles of rubble where houses once stood. Sand, water, dirt, tree branches scraped clean everywhere. Brightly colored houses still standing but roofless. Crumbled walls leaving an unobstructed view of domestic wreckage inside. Weary residents hauling out trash, piling up the effects of their lives on the roadsides to be burned. They moved slowly, lacking the natural cheeriness and liveliness I'd envied the day I landed here. The lady behind me covered her mouth as she glanced out the window. They tell me it was bad, but not this bad. Magwe, sir. Another passenger gasped as Cousin Eddie slowly steered around the massive boulder in the middle of the highway. Papa Boje. She got out in the town of Maho, which was still mostly underwater. I racked my brain for the little Creole that I tried to pick up. Magwe sa, Magwe sa. Look at that awful sight. What a tragedy. What wickedness. Dominica had been stripped bare of all her natural beauty. Grayish skeletal tree limbs bracketed the road and peered eerily over the vast blue sea, or stood scarecrow-like in the dilapidated forest. The landscape appeared worse than the dreariest of New England winter days, with the trees shivering like withered octogenarians, shorn bare of leaves and branches rudely snapped off, leaving them armless, headless. It took an hour to travel just 2 towns over to Mero, where 2 other people jumped out. I don't know if we'll make it to St. Joe, Uncle Eddie warned. The 4 men in the back sighed. I cannot believe what I see in their partner. I don't think Dominican can ever come back from this kind of thing, Lucia.